And we always appreciate when he stops by, makes us smarter. ESPN senior NBA writer. I think we're all guilty of wishful reporting there, Wendy. And it felt like that's what it was yesterday, like Kyrie to the Lakers. So that's why I thought, let's separate fact from fiction here. What do you think transpired yesterday, and where's that going to lead us in, say, a week?
So this is a leverage game that Kyrie is playing. It's a leverage game the Nets are playing. I mean, right now, as you can imagine, the Nets don't believe that there's a lot of teams that are willing to pay Kyrie Irving 35 to $40 million, which is his max salary. I think he can actually go up to 42 million. Frankly, there's not that many teams that have that kind of cap space, maybe one or two. And, frankly, even of the teams that potentially would be able to sign him, how many people really want to commit to Kyrie Irving after what they've watched for the last couple of years? So the Nets are, I think the Nets want to keep Kyrie, but I don't think they want to give him a 5-year contract for over $200 million. I think they want to give him something that's much shorter. And even if it is got multiple years on it, they want to have some protection so that Kyrie doesn't, do what he's done the last couple of years on them. And I think that's natural. And if you're Kyrie Irving, I think you're saying, I'm in demand. I am an all-star player in my prime. There's no reason why I should settle for less. And teams like the Los Angeles Lakers and New York Knicks probably want me. And where this gets complicated is two reasons. One, you have Kevin Durant out there. Because if Kyrie Irving leaves for nothing, which I'll discuss in a minute about that possibility, Durant's going to be like, I'm about to turn 34 years old. I'm in a 4-year contract here, and we're in a rebuild now, facing a somewhat of a rebuild here. I'm not down for that. And then what is Durant's move? So really, Kyrie's sort of backstop is, well, what are you going to tell Kevin? Even if Kevin isn't 100% in love with the partnership that he has with Kyrie, he realizes they're better with him than if he walks for nothing. The second thing is, and I think this is where the Nets have to sort of scratch their chins, is Kyrie Irving really willing to walk away from this $36 million player option that he has? Could he act? Because the most the Lakers can pay him, Dan, is about $6.5 million. That's what they have. Okay. And any wishful thinking about Russell Westbrook and 2 future first-round picks, or Talen Horton-Tucker, or whatever hocus pocus you can come up with to make it work in the trade machine. The only trade that the Nets would be willing to do for Kyrie Irving with the Lakers would be for Anthony Davis. And the Lakers are not trading Anthony Davis for Kyrie Irving, and nor should they. So do you or anybody actually believe that Kyrie would walk away from a $36 million player option, which is sitting there, to go sign for $6 million with the Lakers? Or if he wanted to go to the Knicks, he could sign for $10 million. Now, this is a guy who left $15 million roughly on the table last year because he wouldn't get vaccinated. It is not, I've never seen a player make a move like this, but I can't sit here and tell you that it's impossible. It's also not impossible that a team like the Knicks could start trading pieces off to clear salary cap space. And maybe they couldn't get to 40 million, but maybe they could get to 25 million. And so the drop off wouldn't be as dramatic. But that's really, the landscape that we've got here.
Yeah, I agree with you with Kyrie that would he do this to Kevin Durant? And also, it is Kyrie where I don't know what money means to him. He's the only player that I could probably say that where you go, well, that's just Kyrie being Kyrie, where he's going to go, I'm going to go play with LeBron. Does LeBron want Kyrie? I guess that would be another question.
So LeBron-Kyrie relationship is complicated. You're asking a simple question, a yes or no question. I can't give you a yes or no answer. I think LeBron would play with Kyrie if all things were equal. Would he rather have Kyrie as his point guard than Russell Westbrook? I think that's a simple one. Of course he would. Would he want to trade Anthony Davis for Kyrie? No, he would not. Would he love Kyrie to come play with his team for $6 million and add him to the team that they already have? Yes, he would. So a couple of years ago, when Kyrie was going to be a free agent, the first time, 2019, after LeBron's first year in LA, where the Lakers obviously needed more talent, there was a thawing between the two of them. There was a phone call, and I can't remember who called whom, but there was like this, hey, what we did wasn't so bad, right? We were buddies. We can be buddies again. And it was pretty transparent. That was because Kyrie was going to be a free agent and LeBron needed help. And it didn't work out that way. LeBron ended up getting Anthony Davis, and Kyrie ended up teaming up with Kevin Durant. And so I think, could they be friends of convenience? Yes, I believe they could be friends of convenience. But I really think that unless Kyrie makes a historic move, and not only that, but Dan, I don't want to bore you with salary cap gymnastics, because I know that Lakers fans may be yelling about sign and trade. The Lakers functionally can't, long story short, the Lakers functionally can't do a sign and trade. The only way the Lakers could really realistically trade for Kyrie would be if he opted into his contract for next year and then forced the Nets to trade him. And if he opted into his contract, the Nets would then have him at $36 million and say, okay, well, if you don't want to sign an extension with us, we'll just play out the $36 million. So I think I think the Knicks, I could draw you a whiteboard where I could explain how the Knicks could make it happen. I think that's something we could talk about. I think the Lakers I can't close the door on it, but I think it's a real long shot.
But it feels like, and I'll go back to what I said initially with wishful reporting, as soon as somebody could be available, the Knicks and Lakers are always mentioned because you're going to get clicks. Whether it could actually happen, like the Clippers would probably have a better chance of getting Kyrie than the Lakers would. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. The big question there is Tyronn Lue, who was a huge supporter of Kyrie. It's so funny, Dan, all these connections come back around again, because you're like, well, wait, maybe Durant could play with Westbrook again, and LeBron could play with Kyrie again. And then Ty and Kyrie ended on horrible terms. I would even argue that Ty and Kyrie ended on worse terms than LeBron and Kyrie, when you get right down some of the stuff that was said. But I also know that Ty Lue would get past it, because he's but in terms of, you forget that Ben Simmons plays for the Nets. And this is the thing. The leverage that Kyrie has, as I said, is that Durant would want him. Also, in theory, and geez, we only have to talk about theory. I mean, Ben Simmons has become a theoretical player, quite frankly. In theory, Ben Simmons playing alongside Kyrie and Durant with Joe Harris, who was a very important role player for them, who was out all of last season. In theory, that core team, plus they got a couple of first-round picks in that deal with Philly that they could now flip for potential role players. And Andre Drummond is a helpful player as a backup. Like, there's no reason why the Nets, as structured, couldn't really be a serious contender if they're healthy and functioning well together. It's a giant if. So, yeah, I could create you a trade from the Clippers where they traded off 3 role players, and having those 3 role players, Norm Powell and Reggie Jackson, and Brandon Boston. Like, I would say to you that having those 3 players would be better than having 0 for Kyrie Irving. But again, the only way that functionally works, Dan, is if Kyrie opts into his contract. If he opts out and goes into a sign and trade situation, it makes it almost impossible for the Clippers to trade for him because of this hard cap rule. You just have to trust me. And so again, once he picks up the option with the Nets, what's the Nets' motivation to trade him? So it's really a study in leverage. And my belief is, over the next 8 days, we're going to talk about this a lot, but the Kyrie Irving is probably going to end up being a Net. I can't say for sure, but that's still my projection.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're talking to Brian Windhorst, the ESPN senior NBA writer. I was wondering about this opening up the show. If you're Kevin Durant, you just saw Steph Curry win another title. And I don't know how important legacy is to Kevin Durant, where he looks at this and wants to be considered a better player than Steph Curry. I got to win another championship here. Like, the importance, the clock is ticking. When you turn 34, you know that window of opportunity shrinking rapidly. Help me understand Kevin Durant, if you can, that how important is where he ends, where he leaves the game.
So let me tell you, I hope Chauncey Billups doesn't have a problem with me sharing this conversation. It's not like 4 or 5 years old. Chauncey Billups educated me on something a few years ago. So Chauncey was up for the president job of the Cleveland Cavaliers after David Griffin left, 2 years after they won the title. And I was talking to Chauncey about it. He was my coworker at ESPN. And I said, Chauncey, I think LeBron's going to leave. I think LeBron's going to walk if you go to Cleveland. He was deciding on the job. I would say, I think he's going to walk, and you're going to have to rebuild that from scratch. That my feel is he's going to leave. And Chauncey said, that's okay. I said, what do you mean that's okay? If LeBron walks, the Cavs are going to be a nightmare. He goes, no. If LeBron walks, you get a chance to build a champion from scratch. And that's what we all want to do. I'm like, what are you talking about? And Chauncey explained to me that he was a champion. He didn't need to prove anything in his life, that there was such a rewarding feeling of creating a team on your own and building it up. That is why the title this year for Golden State, that is why they celebrated it. And it felt different to them than the 2 Durant titles, because not all championships are created equal. And that I'm a big believer in not denigrating or putting an asterisk on any championship, but I can only tell you what players describe to me. There's a more tangibility to what the Warriors just did versus the previous 2 championships. And so what Durant wants is that tangibility. And so that's what he was looking for when he came to Brooklyn. He obviously knew if he stayed in Golden State, he could probably win more. He wanted something that he could wrap both arms around. And that's why I say, like, I've told this to people with the Bucks organization. The Bucks winning that title last year is one of the highest value titles that we've seen, because they truly built it from scratch with guys that they put together, and they won it in a small market, and the way they won it was so impressive. I have told people from the Bucks, you can go another 20, 30 years, and even if you win more, it will never feel as great as that title did. That is what Durant is going for. That where me and Kyrie Irving got together and we did it together, and he's still holding on to that. Yeah. He still wants it. And I'm here to tell you, while I'm not impressed with what the Nets have done to build this team, it's still, that ring is still there for them to grab. And I think Kyrie realizes it and Durant realizes it. And that is why they are probably loath to let it go, even though it's been rusty and even though it's been difficult.
Thanks for spending time. I know you're busy this morning. Always appreciate it, Brian. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Have a good day.
That's Brian Windhorst, ESPN senior NBA writer.